Welcome, welcome, welcome.
So for those of you who have joined us, we would love to find out where you're from. If you want to type in the chat box where you're joining us from, and we can shout out your location. We'll get started here in a little bit. We're just going to give people time to log in and settle into our panel discussion this evening.
Be sure to tell us where you're calling in from.
Hello, Tivoli, New York. That's in the Hudson Valley.
I'm curious if anyone's calling in from outside the United States. That'd be fun to see, wouldn't it, Karen?
Yes, Dallas, Raleigh, North Carolina, Arkansas, Yorba Linda, California. Hello. I'm wondering if the hurricane is impacting Dallas. They're probably far enough away. Iowa. Hello, Iowa. Panelists, can you all see the chats coming through in the window?
Yeah.
Great.
Hey, everyone.
Yeah, I'm still looking for Ohio.
We have 89 attendees. Welcome.
Colorado, Michigan. Oh, I see. I have to scroll. Idaho, more California. Hi, Atlanta. We have a few of us here in Atlanta. Brooklyn, hello from Louisville, Virginia, Mission, Texas. Tallahassee, Florida, New Jersey.
Oh, Brazil.
Ah, welcome, Brazil.
Brazil as in the country, Brazil?
As in the country.
What city?
I think.
Tell us what city you're calling us from.
There's a Mexico too that popped up.
Wonderful. Tell us what city as well in Mexico.
Indianapolis.
Bienvenidos. Felicidades.
Danny, thank you so much. Perfect.
Watertown, Tennessee.
Chicago.
Ah, there you go, Sophia.
Oh, there you
Yes,
go,
from
Sophia.
Yes,
Chicago.
let's
I
see.
heard that pronunciation.
Sophia, you're in Chicago. Tanya, are you in New York? And Todd, you're in Ohio?
I'm in Columbus,
Columbus.
Ohio.
Patrick, you're in Virginia, right?
Correct.
And Layla?
Connecticut.
Connecticut. And Fabian, where are you?
Northeast of Atlanta, in the suburbs, town called Lawrenceville.
Okay. So NSHSS is based in Atlanta, so that's where I am.
Welcome. Great to see so many people joining.
Christy Flores says your Spanish is good, Sophia.
Great.
From Reynosa.
Sí, yo puedo defenderme. I can defend myself.
Parts of Texas have already seen light floods. We're hearing from Texas.
Oh, thank you for sharing that.
It looks like it's going to be a bad one. I'm very, very sorry about that.
Lovely to see all these chats from them, their submissions. Osprey, Florida, where is that?
We wanted to let everybody know, it's in the chat box. We have a hashtag NSHSS events and hashtag World Betterment. If you want to tweet about this event, please be sure to include those hashtags.
1:58. Oh, we've started to record already? Okay, we can always edit this piece out, right? Okay. Well, then again, people listening to the recording might want to know all this information. That
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's
yes, of
interesting.
course it is. Of course it is. I still want to know what city in Mexico and what city in Brazil
I
are
think the
attendees.
city in Mexico is Reynosa,
Reynosa?
Reynosa.
Okay.
Someone is saying they don't see anything in the chat.
Is that something that Courtney might be able to
No,
answer?
I think it's somebody texting me. It's okay.
Okay. Because I am seeing their responses not in the chat box, but not in my screen chat box, but I'm seeing it in the Q&A box. And I do see 72 people, 73 people that have responded. Thank you for responding. We love seeing your comments. All the panelists.
Iowa.
Oh, Natalie Tarr. Did you see Natalie Tarr's note that just came in at 7:02? She's in California, and she mentioned about the fires. That it's a tough situation over there. More than 1 million acres. It's the largest ever. And we thought the last time we heard about the fires, it was already bad enough. They've had thousands of lightning strikes that have been the cause of the fires. Karen, what do you think? Start in a couple of minutes?
Yeah. Okay.
We have 197 attendees. Welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for calling in.
At 2:06.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Okay, if you just blink your eyes, Fabian, it goes up like by 10 people.
That's right. That's right. That's right. People, the flood comes in right at between 7:02 and 7:03, right? 2 to 3 minutes after the session starts. We'll start in a minute. Karen, I'm going to go ahead and share the slide, and you feel free to start when you think we're ready.
Yes, I would love to get started and welcome everyone to the How to Be an Advocate panel discussion. This is the first in our World Betterment Series. My name is Karen Kane, and I am the Director of Scholarships at NSHSS, Director of Scholarships and Communications, and also the Executive Director of the NSHSS Foundation. I'm here with an esteemed panel, and we'll get started with the core of the evening's topic in a bit, but I first wanted to just give you a quick overview of NSHSS for those of you joining us who are not as familiar with our organization. NSHSS is a member-based honor society with 1.7 million members in 170 countries around the world. We have 40,000 educators of distinction in 26,000 schools around the country. And our organization was co-founded by Klaus Nobel, who is the senior member of the Nobel Prize family. And Mr. Nobel really founded our organization around the principles of world betterment, diversity, equity, inclusion, and world peace. And that's one of the things that brings us here this evening. With that foundation, we listened to our members, and they told us that they wanted to engage in conversations around the topics that are relevant in the world today. And so today we're launching our World Betterment Series with our How to Be an Advocate panel. And with that, I would love to turn it over to our moderator for the evening, Fabian de Rosario. Take it away,
Thank
Fabian.
you very much. Oh my gosh, that's my photo on the slide. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Karen, and good evening to each of you, and thank you for joining us in this session, and also on the recording for those of you that are listening in. I imagine that you want, like us, we all want to be an effective advocate for equity and justice, and that's why you're on this recording. That's why you're on this call. And on behalf of all of us that helped to plan this, we commend you for this. My name, again, Fabian de Rosario. I am calling you from my home right outside of Atlanta, Georgia. I am originally from the country of Malaysia. I am an immigrant to the United States. I've been in the US for some 30 years now, came here as an international student, as a foreign student, went to school in Illinois, and spent about 10 years in higher education, working at a couple of universities, and after that for a nonprofit organization in Atlanta. I've been in Atlanta, my wife and I have been in Atlanta for 22 years now. And about 15 years ago, I left full-time employment to do what I do today, which is training and development. So I spent I used to travel a lot, but with COVID-19, now I'm doing a lot of webinars. And most of my clients tend to be in the Fortune 500 companies. So I do training and development. That's my thing. Now, the agenda tonight, I am your moderator, and I'm going to walk you through. I'm going to be your tour guide for the next remaining hour and 25 minutes. We're going to begin with each of the panelists having about 2 or 3 minutes to do some highlights about themselves. And they're also going to share with you a little bit about what they are now doing to be an advocate for racial and social justice, which is the topic for tonight. After each of and I'm not going to introduce them, they're going to introduce themselves. After each of their comments, then we're going to spend about 20 to 25 minutes of some Q&A between me and the panelists. And after that, around 8 o'clock, I'll watch time at about 8 p.m. for the next 25 minutes. We'll entertain your questions. All right, so that's our plan for this evening. As you can see, these are our 5 panelists, Todd Corley, Tanya Odom, Sophia Gonzalez, Layla St. Louis, and Patrick Berard Jr. And to kick things off, we're going to go down this sequence right there. My friend Todd Corley, I have known him for a little over a decade, and we've even had a chance to work together when he was the chief diversity officer at a major global retailer. So with that, Todd.
Thanks, Fabian. Thanks to everyone for joining tonight. First of all, on behalf of the NSHS Foundation, which I'm a chair, welcome you all to come tonight to the session. Real brief for me, I've been a global diversity officer, as Fabian alluded to. Currently, I wear a few different hats. One, chair of the foundation board for the NSHSS. I also do consulting and advising for clients globally on the issue and the work around DEI. Most recently, I joined the faculty at Villanova University, where we've actually just launched a graduate certificate in DEI. And one of our courses is on social and racial justice. So for me, to answer the question about what I've been doing is every space that I'm in, whether it be work or education or this work with the board, I'm just trying to be active and a steward and to learn from those who are the next generation, to keep informed and to be relevant and to push the needle and the envelope forward. So that's my very high level introduction. I look forward to talking with all of you at some point. I'll pass it to my really good friend, Tanya.
Before you do that, Todd, would you tell us a little, what are you doing now to be an advocate for social and racial justice? What are some of the more recent things, so 1 or 2 that you're doing?
Sure. So I'll say more about the Villanova piece. So for example, the Villanova work, what we're currently doing is we launched a curriculum that's focused on getting skills for those who are either in the HR space or not HR space, to figure out what does it mean to be conscious around the work around DEI, but also when we think about one particular course that we've rolled out, that's on social justice. So for me, my contribution is on the educational side, but it's also with clients and trying to get them to hear the work differently. I have the fortune of talking to CEOs and chairmen of boards, even today, for instance, so regularly having that conversation, getting them to be plugged in. So my gift is to try to influence in organizations from the inside.
Wonderful. And attendees, I hope that gives you more context for all of our panelists as each of them share a little bit more about what they're doing in this space. And with that, Tanya Odom.
Thank you, Fabian. Thank you, Todd. Thank you, everyone. It's 248 people. That's a lot of people at 7 o'clock. So, I mean, you'll see my bio. I always say I try to share things about myself that are not found on Google, right? So a couple of things. One is I love sunsets. So you can't see it, but I'm zooming in from New York City. And actually, I see the light changing in my apartment because there's a sunset. I like sparkles, so I put on some sparkles. Todd, no comment from you, please. The work that I do is across sectors. So I work at universities, I work in corporations, I work with the United Nations around the world before COVID. Today is my 166th day in quarantine. I've left my home, but I've only left the island of Manhattan, I think 4 times. So I've been to other boroughs, but only the island of Manhattan. The question about what I'm doing is actually one that's not one that I often talk about. And actually in a lot of the allyship advocate research, they talk about being careful about performative allyship, right? So I don't want to sort of be talking about it like this is what I'm doing. So it's interesting when I was looking at that question, noting my own struggle to even answer the question, right? Because it's not like pat myself on the back. So I was trying to think of what I'm doing. I mean, I think my work every day, my work specifically since May 25th with the killing of George Floyd. I think the fact that we almost lost Jacob Blake in a recent incident, like elevating those stories so that we're not muting the realities of injustice that are happening every day. A couple of interesting things I did, which I've thought about before. I also put some money in the largest Black-owned bank in America, which is One United Bank, which was an easy thing to do. I got this very cool card with it where you get to pick what figure you want on the front of the card. And I think it's interesting. I continue to educate myself, even as a woman of color, about anti-Blackness, about anti-racism, about what it means to learn and unlearn history in a country where we haven't always told the truth about it. So I've been really fortunate to go to some of the best schools in the United States of America, and yet I know that there are gaps in my knowledge around our country, around injustice, around Black people, people of color, BIPOC in general. So I'll leave it there and I'll turn this over to Sofia Gonzalez.
Thank you for that, Tanya.
Hi, everyone. It's so good to be here. I'm just excited to be part of this conversation. My name is Sofia Gonzalez, and I have the esteemed honor of saying that I was 2019's Educator of the Year with National Society of High School Scholars, which I must say was one of the hallmarks of my life. Washington, D.C. will definitely go down as an epic experience. And as a minority, right? And as a woman of color, I felt like it was such a pivotal moment. As we're having this conversation, representation matters. And that for me was another honor that I was able to represent my culture. I'm half Mexican, I'm half Puerto Rican, I'm a Mexican. And as a result, it's so exciting to be able to represent on these national platforms. So I definitely am completely indebted to NSHSS. We are a wonderful marriage, and I'm excited to continue partnership and to continue these incredible opportunities to establish change, to spark the conversation, to move forward in the pathway of justice. I'm also the founder of a nonprofit called Project 214 in honor of my first classroom. I've been in the field of teaching for well over a decade, and quite frankly, teaching is not a job for me. It is definitely my calling. It is a heaven-sent calling that grants me the best of times and the worst of times. But at the same time, I really believe that teachers are change agents, and they are in a position to create and establish and propel social change. And I take that So that's such a sacred thing for me. I've been teaching in the high school classroom for 12 years now, and high school kids bring me to life. And I learn just as much from them as I hope that they learn from me. I go by Miss G, that's like my alter ego. And I believe that I earned that gangster status. Yes, I did. Okay. And that's on period, like my students have taught me. I do also teach at the college level. I'm in a teacher prep program called Teach Now that empowers tomorrow's teachers. So not only am I passionate about students, but I'm so passionate about the teachers that are in the trenches with them. And I truly believe that they need an advocate as well, that teachers are in the trenches and need a voice more than ever. I know what it is to be in a school where it is completely under-resourced and overpopulated, and the ramifications of that. And so I'm really passionate about elevating the teacher voice and also empowering tomorrow's teachers. And what's cool about me working with Teach Now is that I get students from all over the globe. I mean, when we sign in, and I get to see where they're at. The time zones are just all over the map. And that's such an exciting proposition that I get to really, I mean, it's just so humbling to learn from these students and also impart the knowledge and the passion that I feel cannot be taught, but rather instilled, right? And so that's been just really neat. That's where I'm at, that's where I live. And circling back super quickly to Project 214, it was born out of a lot of pain, right? How many of us know that oftentimes out of our pain can come purpose, and out of our crisis can create this opportunity to emerge into something completely brand new. My first couple of years of teaching were nestled in a gang-infested neighborhood within the city of Chicago, and unfortunately, a lot of my students died to gang and to gun violence, and I saw just the disparities that at-risk youth were facing, that it just instilled in me just this flame to be an advocate, to be a voice. And so Project 214 was born out of that exposure of just the disenfranchisement of these kids and how they were really put on the margins. I mean, these kids were in a lot of trouble. And as a result, they were ostracized, they were disenfranchised. And that really created just a platform to me for me to be like, wait a minute, these kids are survivors and they've survived things that most adults cannot handle. And yes, they may be unlovable, but they just need an opportunity and an adult in their corner who cares. And though I didn't reach them all, many of them did end up graduating and just making just a future for themselves. So Project 214 really focuses on empowering students and teachers with basic resources and school supplies, and just empowering them with the message that education is a fundamental right and it is not a privilege, and your zip code should not determine your destiny. And we go after at-risk and underserved people groups. Oftentimes they are people of color. And so that's just where I'm at, elevating the voice of the voiceless and advocating for those that really need someone in their corner and just need an opportunity. And so I'm just excited to continue on in that mission to promote this idea that education is for all and it is not a privilege. So I can keep going. I can keep going, but I'm going to stop right here.
And we're going to come back to you so that you can keep going. Thank you for sharing that background and the passion behind it as well. Let's meet Layla St. Louis.
Hello, everyone. My name is Layla St. Louis. I'm a rising high school senior. I'm an NSHSS ambassador, and I founded a nonprofit called Blackout Stanford. I founded this in May of this year. We are striving to educate our communities and bring light onto issues that are affecting our communities, and just being able to show everyone that this is happening and it needs to stop, and educating everyone so that they have an understanding, so that they don't go outside of this world or outside of their homes uneducated, uninformed. So far, we have done a 3-day webinar where we talked about the importance of voting, race in education, race in the healthcare system, and we've done a protest, and we're striving to do more. So yeah, that's about me.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Gosh, I have so many questions for you. Let's come back because I'd like you to expand a little bit more about some of the work that you're doing. Patrick, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to introduce myself. I'm Patrick Berard Jr., an Eagle Scout from Troop 259, Chesapeake, Virginia, lifetime national member, an Airman National, which is a National Honor Society within Boy Scouts, a certified Globe teacher, previous vice president of Marlins Go Green University Club, and a member of the National Society of High School Scholars. I completed my schooling in Chesapeake, Virginia at Western Branch High School, and I am a 2020 graduate of Virginia Wesleyan University with a degree in Earth and Environmental Sciences. I have volunteered with various organizations such as my university student-led environmental club called Marlins Go Green, the Virginia League Conservation of Voters, the Center for Sustainable Communities, the Sierra Club, Chesapeake Bay Group, and the Gun Group. I am an advocate for racial and social justice in and around my community. Most recent, I was a senior project co-director fellow for the Virginia League Conservation of Voters, where we developed, coordinated, and successfully executed a Virginia statewide virtual panel-style webinar titled Environmental and Racial Justice Here and Now in the Era of COVID-19. Where do we go from here? On November 8th, 2019, I managed a blog for the Gun Group, and I was instrumental in devising and coordinating the first climate change symposium and Green Career Fair titled Generations Uniting to Address Climate Change at Virginia Wesleyan University. Nevertheless, I was one of 5 students at my university selected to participate as a young disruptor for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization Chiefs of Transformation Conference held December 12th through the 15th in 2019 in Norfolk, Virginia. Lastly, I coordinated, wrote, and applied for an endowment fund recipient award with the assistance of some members of Marlins Go Green. My strength is my attitude. I like to take challenges that I can do it. In my way of thinking, I take both success and failure in a balanced manner. I do not like to say weakness, but I like to say scope for improvement, meaning I won't leave any task incomplete. I believe in myself and my hard work, and I strive for perfection in everything. My short-term goal is to have such a platform where I can grow my career along with an organization's growth. My long-term goal is to be the reason for the success of an organization, and I prefer to see an organization as a benchmark to other opportunities. My ethic is I never neglect an opportunity for improvement. My guidance and mentorship consist of my parents and my sister. Ultimately, my success is attributed to supportive people that believe in me and my passion for a successful outcome in my endeavors. My motto is success is keeping your mind awake and your desire asleep. It always seems impossible until it's done.
Thank you, Patrick. And I see all those certificates in the back. I've been squinting, trying to read them. Good for you. Welcome to each and every one of our panelists. Thank you for your contribution of your talent, your time, your voice on this call, on this recording. Let's begin with the first question. And frankly, this is the question that everybody dialed in for. Did I just say dial in? That everybody joined in on this one. And I'm going to ask Tanya to start first, but after Tanya is done, if we have time, I'd love to hear from other panelists as well. What are some steps that someone can take if they want to be a better ally or advocate for social and racial justice?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can talk about what I believe I do, and then just from some of the things I'm reading, I think I said it earlier, just about learning and unlearning, right? And the way to do that is often to listen. And I think the listening piece is so incredibly crucial because there's an acknowledgement that we don't know everything. And I think that really is part of what being an advocate, ally, or accomplice is knowing that we don't know everything. And in fact, some of the things we learned are probably not correct, right? The other thing for me is, I think, Dr. Ken Hardy does a lot of work on racial trauma, and he had this phrasing that I just keep holding on to, and he says that the work is inside out. that sort of before we actually go out and sort of say to people, can you tell me what to do? Can you tell me what to do? I have to look internally and say, hey, Tanya, what are you thinking about? How did you react to this? What are the places in my life where I have privilege and power? And then I think, you know, it's doing things like saying my pronouns sometimes, right? She and her, those are my pronouns. And in fact, many people who identify as transgender have said those of us who are not transgender doing that actually makes it easier for other people to be able to say that, to be able to identify that way. And the last thing I think here is, it's not about standing up for somebody, right? It's not about speaking for somebody. It's actually with. And I really think that's an important shift for many people, because they think I can do this. It's like, what's the with? And then the last thing, and I tweeted out some things earlier, some resources about being an ally. What are those areas of privilege or power? I have a platform, right? I have a social media following. I have ability to speak to different people, so I can share information, whether it be about the Jacob Blake incident or whether it be how to be a better ally. And then the other thing is, I don't think of myself as at a done point. Like right now, I was reading, I'm sort of in the middle of Beyond Ally, and she has some great framings here about some different frameworks. She did a lit review, and so she has these frameworks on what being an ally means. So it's me looking at what I know it means to be an ally or think, but then looking at something else that's out there that I may not have seen in the past. So that's what comes to mind.
Thank you, Tanya. I might come back to you to probe a little bit more. Any bills from any of the panelists? Todd?
So the only thing I would add is, and I think Tanya nailed it, but I would add, we also have to have patience, right? There has to be a patience around how do you become an ally and how do you do this work? Because at the end of the day, we're running up against people who either resist or are uncomfortable, and ourselves, as Tanya talked about, have to be willing to, you know, use our position, our privilege, and talk about things. But be patient that some people are not at the same point as you are. And, you know, I can think about story after story, but if you think about, you know, decisions that we make about how we vote, who we vote for, who our candidates are, our position on a policy issue, oftentimes there's a point of disagreement. And the only way to get through that is if you are patient about how do you persuade somebody to see your point of view. And you may not ever get them, but if you at least have a sense of being patient about it and being comfortable with your position, you can, you know, embrace some of where you disagree. But I think patience is a part of what we also have to practice, which is not easy in a world as fast as ours, in a world where immediacy matters, and we're not waiting for the next tweet to come out because it's, you know, instant. So it's kind of, we have to practice that. I would just add that.
Thank you. Anyone else want to tackle this? I'd like to pose this question, which Tanya prompted me to think about. You began your comment, Tanya, about being a seeking knowledge, seeking to understand, being a truth seeker, and the importance of listening. That seems so fundamental. That seems like such an easy instruction, but I know it's hard to do. Well, in your experience with you consulting, coaching, speaking to groups, individuals, working on individuals, why is it so hard for people to listen, to understand?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really big question. So I think particularly around issues of social justice, and if I could say specifically around race also, I think, first of all, many of us get really tied up in like, am I saying it right? Right? So we're not listening, but we're thinking about the wording to say, or how we're saying it, or am I coming across, you know, someone in the chat a question about wokeism. Am I being woke? So I think we get caught up in that. I think also really listening. I mean, I'm a mindfulness practitioner, and it's interesting what, you know, I've been meditating for 13, 14 years, and it's one of the things in mindfulness, we talk about being in the present moment, yes, but it's also knowing the difference between responding and reacting. And so for me, the difference is really listening. Like, I can react. There are people who say things. I mean, I'm on Twitter all the time, and I could react, but it really takes me the opportunity to listen. And the last thing I'll say is, you know, one of my mentors is Mel King. So if any of you are from Boston, he's a civil rights leader. And he has a quote that I think about all the time. He says, really listening means a willingness to change your mind. Mm-hmm. And I think if we think of listening from that perspective, that's incredibly powerful, because that means I'm not just listening to respond, but I'm actually listening to possibly change my mind with new information. So I hold on to his many wise words, but around this topic, those just feel so wise and so important to me.
And when we're dealing with heavy topics like this, where there are so many divergent ways that people could think about it, I think of the need for, as you spoke, I was thinking about how I can reflect on what you were saying, and I thought about the word vulnerability. I need to allow myself to be vulnerable. I am an imperfect being, because I need to check the ego at the door, right? Because there's a saying, and I forget the person that said it. Some of you may remember this quote. He said, "Ego is the anesthesia that deadens the pain of stupidity." We need to allow ourselves to bring the barrier down and allow for the truth to come in. Only then can we listen to understand with patience, as Todd spoke about, and if needed, pivot. Give yourself the permission to shift your attitude about it. That's the response versus the reaction that it's my way or the highway. That's what I think prevents our progress in our society. Anyone else want to chime in? The question on the floor is, what are some different steps that we can take if we want to be a better ally, we want to be a better advocate? Anyone want to chime in before we move to the next question? Sophia?
Yeah, sure. Just in hearing the conversation, just a couple of thoughts come to my mind. And one of those thoughts is to be open to different avenues by which to learn that could be unorthodox. For example, as I've mentioned, as a teacher, I learn a lot from my students who are much younger than me. And, as a teacher, you're the expert in the classroom, but if you take on the posture of both being a teacher and a student, things can change. And so being open to other spaces that could possibly inform you, I think is a nice starting point, right? Being open to those different perspectives, being open to these unorthodox pathways by which your mind can be transformed, and being open to that. And I know, Tanya, you were mentioning about getting caught up in the words and the language and all the semantics. And if I'm honest, that when all of this went down with George Floyd, that was one of the things that I was particularly nervous about. Like, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to set someone off. This is a very sensitive time right now, and I want to be on the side of peace. But yet at the same time, to also be cognizant of the collective conversation and what can collectively set off some folks. Something like all lives matter versus Black lives matter. That was a hot button phrase. And to not understand the ramifications of that phrase could cost you a teachable moment. And so just sitting back and just seeing how the conversation evolves, I think is something that is equally important. And just to be open, to be mindful, to be sensitive, and to have this complete bipartisan understanding of both sides, right? And I think that that's really hard to do, to step out of your position and to really take a step back and to scan through, as big a picture as you can observe, to really come to mutual understanding.
Sophia, you remind me that over the past couple of weeks, there have been several individuals in some of the programs that I've done, in some of the conversations that I've had with clients in training sessions. I have had more than a dozen individuals that said that I am learning more about the issues. I'm learning more about structural racism. I'm learning more about some of the things that Tanya was talking about, that she was challenging us, from my son, from my daughter. So for those of you young people that are on this call, realize you got tremendous power.
Yes, they do.
You've got parents, aunties, grandpas, grandmothers that you have access that none of us do. They're not on this call, right? You have access to them. So find the strength, find the respect, find the courtesy, find the grace, find the courage to do some of the things that you've been hearing from these panelists, you have tremendous power to change, to reframe their understanding of what's going on. Layla, could I turn to you for a more specific question?
Yeah.
Now, you've done a lot of work. You've mentioned a little bit, and I'd like you to expand a little bit more on advocacy, especially the one focusing on school to prison pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is a pretty focused area, but it's a huge area. Please speak to how you think racism in education acts as an arm of an unjust criminal justice system.
It plays a huge part into it. There's a whole bunch of studies, not only to prison pipeline, just more suspensions for BIPOC students. There's less opportunity for them. And by taking them out of schools for suspensions, it gives them more time to step away from education and entering things that aren't good for them. They have more access to those things because they aren't in a classroom sitting down and focusing on their future, on their goals, on whatever career they would like, because they are suspended. So I feel that racism plays a huge part into this, because teachers or principals can just suspend someone because, hey, I don't like him or her, they're Black, they're Hispanic, they're whatever. I'm gonna say, they're suspended, they're being disruptive, they have to go. And it plays hand in hand, and it's terrible. It's terrible.
It's very subjective.
Yes, very.
And so all the biases flow in unchecked, unmanaged, unfiltered. And if somebody is alone, doesn't have the support, they lose and forgotten.
They lose hard. Because they don't, like you said, they don't have a support system. They might not have a mom. They might not have a dad that's saying, hey, why are you suspending my child? What are the grounds for you to suspend, to expel my child? Why is my child not in class learning instead? So without having that support system, without having someone checking them, they just end up anywhere.
And I mentioned I'm an immigrant, and so my immigrant lens is listening to you, Layla. And so if the family struggles with the English capability, and let alone I have good English capability, and I find it hard to navigate the system sometimes. That can be hard.
Mm-hmm.
It can be
Very
hard. Yeah. Patrick, let's focus on another topic. This topic, there are so many layers to it. Patrick, I know you have a tremendous passion for access to voting, and what are some of the disparities that you would like us to be alert about? As advocates, we need to be alert of the issues. And once again, I always will go back to Tanya. Go do your homework. Don't rely on just an hour and a half panel discussion. Get all the answers. Go on YouTube. Go read the articles. Have dialogues. Right. So, Patrick, here's my question to you: what type of disparities influence low young voter turnout? Also, what does that mean for this upcoming election?
Well, first I want to start off by saying, through voting, young and old voters, no matter one's experience, socioeconomic status, race, gender, sexuality, or disability, we all have to work together to further address the equitable needs of this country. Even though young voters account for half of the voting population, historical trends continue to decrease voter turnout. In 2016, voter participation declined by 2% from a record 52% at the 2008 presidential election. Historical trends and figments of today's society still socially and racially and legislatively instill fear into its citizens, and in turn affix to low voter turnout. These racial, social, and legislative charged tactics are used to annihilate the following demographics that today still face ruination and continue to ascend in adversity. Some of the demographics include women, young people, and people of color. The following eras and movements are moments in time where we as a country had to unite as one to fight for citizenship and the right to vote and equity of treatment, with reference to the women's suffrage, slavery, the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, the 14th Amendment, which gave citizenship to anyone naturalized or born in the United States, which includes slaves, the 15th Amendment, which gave African-American men the right to vote, and the 19th Amendment, which gave all women the right to vote. This also includes Jim Crow laws, enactment of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and lastly, to the present day deep-rooted laws and legislative tactics utilized to disenfranchise Black and brown communities. Young people, and specifically people of color, are delusioned by the systematic approaches to annihilate and disenfranchise young voters and people of color. To my fellow young voters, remember, we are indispensable, and we have the agility and the intellectual capacity to go out and vote for this 2020 presidential election. Even though young adults aged 18 to 29 make up 21% of the voting eligibility, in recent years, voter eligibility has increased. In a few predictions, it is said millennials and Gen Zs will be the largest share of eligible voters in 2020. It is not that young people are half-hearted, egotistical, disengaged, and negligent in politics. Too often, we have young people fail to see through our good intentions because of the systematic barriers and personal distractions that we face daily, which inhibit us from doing something as simple as going out to the polls to vote. Limitations that inhibit young voters include waiting in lines for multiple hours to vote, inflexible work schedules and polling times, fear of one's absentee ballots not being accounted in time, educators inadequately preparing youth to comprehend basic civic and political concepts, the polarization amongst various races and one's socioeconomic status, structural barriers of gerrymandering. Today, a dozen of states are placing restrictive photo ID requirements and cuts to early voting in efforts to make voter registration more difficult. These attacks on the state level disenfranchise voters of color in the largest rollback to voting rights since the Reconstruction era. To all young and old voters, this election is not solely about you and I or one selfish gain. This election is about all people being on a united front through the implementation of sound laws, legislation, political figures voted in office by the people of this country. These measures ensure and develop and wholeheartedly fix the issues that arise in and near our communities. As a young Black man, I am voting in the 2020 presidential election to hopefully have change in police reform, safety in our streets, in our schools, access to affordable health care, clean water, the decriminalization towards people of color, which includes our immigrant neighbors who are also profiled and thrown out as if they're less than human. Lastly, more than anything, I am voting for opportunity, because as a Black citizen and a person of color, that is one entity that separates us from a state of destitution rather than a state of affluency. In closing, with my speech, I hope to inspire young voters to go out to the polls and vote.
I am so glad that you prepared those remarks. And this was what you said to all of us. You submitted that in the email. You wanted to make sure this statement was made. So thank you for preparing that. And folks, get your mail-in ballot requests in now. I got one for my wife here, my mom, I got her to sign it. My dad's is already mailed, my auntie. I tell you what, right? You got the power, right? You got the power. Make sure for them that it's in their mail.
Yeah, the only thing I want to add, I want to applaud, Patrick, for sharing that, is just to say and echo, this year is important beyond anybody's imagination. And I just encourage young people, because you do have the power to change course of whatever your reality wants to be, to do it early, to be persistent, to not wait and delay. And I'll say old heads, procrastinate. That's generational. So don't procrastinate, be active, be informed, and be counted.
Wonderful. Todd, stay unmuted. This question's for you. In your career, you've worked in places that have employed multi-generational workforce. I have seen you in various cities speak to people at the stores, young managers, and now you're teaching diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, at a major university. You help to shape that course, and you've done this before at George Washington University as well, if I remember correctly. Now, what insights have you learned with this huge variety of exposure that you've had to this topic and to people at an individual level? What insights would you like to share?
I'll be brief. I think the insights that I have learned is with each generation that takes its proper seat and gets the baton passed back to them, the notion of transparency, authenticity, and optimism becomes increasingly more important. And very briefly, what that means for me is, and Patrick and Layla talked about this, the notion of being transparent and thoughtful and open about what we need to do, how we need to do it. People want that generationally. And that doesn't just skew across, older generations, but younger generations are making that a requirement. So you have to be thinking about that. You have to be thinking about authenticity, not just to say, I want you to vote, I want you to be there, I want you to support a cause, I want you to stop suspending people. I need you to mean that and act on it. So I need you to be authentic about it. And optimism, meaning that there's a better tomorrow. Tomorrow that we're talking about is the one that Patrick alluded to, about voting and using your voice. And the one that Layla talked about being mindful of how people show up and what might cause somebody to say, you're on the outside looking in. There's an optimism that we all have to be ready for, but that doesn't come by just pretending it's gonna happen. You gotta be active, you gotta have courage, you gotta be persistent, you gotta ask the questions, you gotta be engaged. So I think the insights that I have about anything are those three words: transparency, authenticity, and optimism.
Thank you for that. We'll remember that. I hope you all have written that down. Sophia, could I pose this question about, you're an educator and very passionate. You have your nonprofit. You've described it a little bit. Tell us about the classroom. What kinds of best practices are you incorporating in your classroom to teach, to encourage justice, equality, anti-racism? How do you do that, Sophia, in your role as an educator?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, first off, I'm grateful that my subject matter kind of opens up that platform with English literature. And it's such an opportunity to really just set the stage, but I'm very intentional with my curriculum. Every school district, every charter, every, brick and mortar has a curriculum by which they want their teachers to follow. But here's what I want to say about that. In the times that we live in, I feel like it could perhaps be time for it to be our social responsibility as educators to figure out a way to incorporate some of those central themes that are impacting our world as we know it, matter-of-factly and without apology. So in every unit, I tend to craft this undercurrent of social justice throughout the school year. It's like a thread, and you see it by my selection of text, by my speeches, by the historical figures and the poets and the writers and the authors that I want my students to kind of delve deep in and analyze and just really reflect on that particular author's work. Right now, for this current school year, I'm teaching AP language and comp. And so we are analyzing a lot of speeches and a lot of rhetoric. I'm like, perfect. Here's your first quote. This was just this week. Dr. Martin Luther King. How would you analyze and what would you presume Dr. King's central theme or his central argument to be when he asserted injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere? Let's talk about it. That was yesterday. And so those are just examples, being very intentional and really creating an opportunity not to politicize my students, not to infringe my personal biases and point of view, right? We all have our own personal biases, right? Of our view and our paradigm of justice work, but for them to really arrive to their own conclusions. But I create opportunities for that to happen. And I really believe that educators really need to rise up and make that happen. I recently just got this book here. It's called Planning to Change the World, a plan book for social justice educators. Just really, I mean, just, you know, what are we spending our resources on? What are some of the things that, you know, we want to include? And ultimately, and here's my secret motive. I'm going to put it out there, Fabian. My secret agenda is to turn my students into social justice warriors, advocates, and freedom fighters. There, I said it.
With knowledge is power. With knowledge is power. And what I love about that story, Sophia, is that you have utilized your influence, your power, your role as an educator to teach the truth. You intentionally make sure that the truth prevails. And I'm going to turn to Tanya because you're an educator too. You publish books. Any bills on this? How might you answer this question?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, it's interesting. I think there's the formal education and then there's informal education, right? So in many ways, people like Sophia are the people that shape so many of us. Like I wouldn't be, my voice probably wouldn't be as strong. My mother might disagree, but it may not be as tuned if I didn't have incredible educators behind me, right? So that's what comes to mind. But the thing I think about is how do we help, using whatever way we have, help people understand what's going on, right? So, you know, I'm even looking in the chat box. So like, you know, how do people distinguish between fake news? How do people decide how to learn information? I mean, I think we're in a moment right now. And I think, you know, this is that question of movement or moment that people are asking, particularly young people are asking. And I think we are in a moment right now where people are saying, well, why didn't I know about that? Maybe that's not true. So there are people who still believe that sort of, you know, racism's been solved or sexism's been solved, right? So we're talking about gender pay equity and we're looking at the disparity. And I know some of you are not there yet, but some people like Fabian, Todd, and myself are working on this now because we don't want there to be disparity of women and men in pay. We don't want Black women and Latina women and Asian women to make so much less than white. I mean, that's why we do this work, right? So I think I go from the framing, and by the way, it's not a shaming that doesn't work. No, right? You talked about vulnerability, which Brene Brown talks about a lot. She did a podcast once that I listened to, and she said, shaming doesn't get us anywhere. So it's not me saying, do you know about the 1619 and what that meant in terms of enslaved Africans being brought to this country? It's not shaming someone. It's actually just saying, I didn't learn about it either. Right? I think that's one. The other thing is, I love the comment about vulnerability because I use myself. And Todd and I both know a consultant named Josie Lassa Gallagher, and she always talks about using ourselves as an instrument. And so as a biracial woman who presents as white, who people in New York think I'm Boricua or Puerto Rican, people out of the US, where I, before COVID, spent 40% of my time, thought I was a white American woman. So what does that mean as I talk about race, as I sort of say to people, like, what does it mean to be multiracial? Do you know people who don't have the language? You know, I remember growing up calling myself mixed. We didn't have the language of biracial. We didn't have multiracial as language, right? I'm older than most of you. So the fact that we have language now, I think helps. The other thing I do is I try to share, and Todd probably knows this because he probably puts the mute button on his phone, but I literally read and listen to podcasts consistently, and I will share them out. And I've done that my entire life. Like, I just will send out stuff. If I find something's really good that I've read, I'm sending it out to people. And so it's not like I need to keep this so I become the quote expert. It's like, no, I want other people to see this. I want other people to hear this podcast. I want other people to read this research paper. And so I try really hard to do that. But I just have to say, having a father who didn't have a formal education past high school, my dad used to say, and Todd's heard this, that he got his degree from UCLA, University of the corner of Lenox Avenue in Harlem. And so I grew up, and my sisters grew up knowing that this elitist educational background that people value is often not accepting of everybody. And we were really blessed to be in those spaces, but we were also blessed to also be able to relate to different types of people. And so I think when people say education to me, I'm often like formal and informal, right? Which could mean that conversation on the plane when I flew, which could mean the conversation in a coffee shop or something like that. Like I worry sometimes that we think it has to be formalized education. And I think some of the learning and unlearning that's happening now, whether it be the protests, whether it be things like, you know, the people on this call are doing, those aren't always formal environments, right? And I think we know from people like Paulo Freire and other people historically who did this work, you don't need to be in a classroom to learn. And I'm not telling you all to drop out. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying the learning isn't only in a classroom space. And so that for me would be as an educator.
Yeah, and this session is part of that outside the classroom space to have some learning. Leila, I'd like to pose a question to you, because this is a related but a different topic. I want to make sure we get to this in terms of our prepared comments, and then we'll swing over to the questions from the participants. And this one is about police brutality, and of course we don't believe in stereotypes. Just because you're a policeman doesn't mean you're brutal. But there is a structure, there's a system that has to be addressed. And I know this is an area of passion for yours as well. So this conversation about police brutality and institutional racism in the police system, it's been going on for decades. Do you think that we see an opportunity to finally change the status quo of policing amid this movement that we see? What gives you hope? What would you encourage politicians and individuals like me and the ones that are calling in to do to realize positive change in this very difficult topic?
I definitely think that now is the time for change. There's movements all over the world, not only in the US, that are happening that want to see change. This is an open opportunity for everyone to come together to educate themselves, for everyone to, because we have to focus on the bigger picture, which is equality for everyone, whether they're Black people, LGBTQ plus people, more. There's a whole bunch of situations that are put into this bigger picture. So this is the moment now for everyone to focus on the issues at hand, come together and change. And we need to focus on that, not the background noise, I should say. And yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Leila. We could spend more time on this, right? There's just so many layers to this. Karen, Grace, and Courtney, who are, Grace and Courtney, by the way, you see their names here on the screen. They're operating this machine in the background. We acknowledge them. Let's go to, I'm going to open up the questions and pick a question here. Here's one that's related to something that we've mentioned already in our banter. And it's about, things started moving. Hang on a second. I'm trying to find it again. Okay. Here it is. What is your view on wokeism? Wokeism. 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 What's your view on it?
Is that directed towards me?
Anybody.
Oh.
I'm just reading some questions that are coming up in the Q&A from the participants. Right now we have 247 attendees, looks like. Anybody want to give a stab at it?
I mean, I can address it. I think, you know, I think connects a little bit to the cancel culture idea. I think these are things we're talking about right now, right? So I would want to talk about them. I think what I worry about with this wokeism concept is that it feels like who's setting that litmus test, right? Like who's saying when you're woke enough? There was this wonderful piece that was circulated a couple of years ago, something about I'm leaving the church of wokeism or something, right? Like this notion that there's a hierarchy and when you get to a point you're woke. And I guess for me, the language of cultural humility comes to mind, right? Which basically says that it's a lifelong learning process. There's not an end point, right? So if we said we were woke 5-10 years ago when Todd and I, oh my gosh, Todd, I even like gave us little time. 20 years ago, when Todd and I were doing work on Wall Street, we weren't using the same language now. So if we just threw our hands up and said we're woke, we wouldn't learn how to be more aware and mindful of using language that's respectful of the LGBTQ plus community. Like, I just think it's more about evolving. Do I understand what it means? Yes. Do I think, though, that sometimes it's used as a way to silence people and as a way to sort of do a one-up? So I'm a student of the civil rights movement, right? Like, that is, to me, such at the heart of the work that I do. It's not the civil rights movement. You don't hear people saying, well, I know this more and I know that more. It was about community. It was about listen to Dr. King's language of beloved community. It was about coming together. It was about protesting. It was about doing these things that are connected. I just also want to say, I saw this in the chat box in terms of asking about the boycotts. I think it's why I bring up the civil rights movement, because I think we sometimes in America in particular, we don't do such a great job of weaving in what we've learned, right? And so when you look at why people boycott, it's because we have a history in the civil rights movement, among other things, that have shown that boycotts can in fact be effective, right? Doesn't mean I agree with every single boycott, but do I understand what's happening? Yeah. The other thing is, I have to give props and praise to anybody that uses their celebritydom, their voice, to take a stand, because in the current culture and climate, it's not always easy. So, by the way, the fact that the sports teams stood up and did this, they've now completely changed the conversation for many people who might not have wanted to talk about the Jacob Blake situation, right? People are asking, what do we think about the Jacob Blake situation? It's horrific, right? Like, whatever we think, it's horrific. And this group of people said, we know by doing this, we can get attention. And that's what they did. So I think that's important.
Yeah, that's a good example of pivoting, right? That's an example of pivoting. Here's one, potentially two questions, somewhat related. The United States mostly tends to be, or at least we claim, the land of the free, fair, open, liberal society, at least compared to other countries. And once again, I would imagine, at least in our own minds, we have our own personal biases, right? For those of us that live here in this country. Race as a factor in law, social life, and politics has largely been solved in this country. So why continue focusing on race? It's divisive. How might you respond to someone that kindly presents that argument? Layla.
I would say that it's been focusing, all of our history has been focusing on race, if we're going to be honest. So I feel as though we're trying to move to an area where race isn't a factor anymore. Because right now, race is a huge factor in police brutality and systemic racism and all of that. So I don't know how to word what I'm saying.
That's all right.
No,
Let's think out loud together.
I think Layla, though, brings up a good point. I'll just add a little bit. I think the issue of race, first of all, isn't solved. So we've touched on it. We're talking about it. We have a history around it. But when we start to say that, we have to maybe go past color, and I've heard this so recently, that it gets to a point where we're ignoring what is in the room, which is, this is at the root of what we look at when we think about things that are structurally wrong, things that are holding people back, and we're not acknowledging the fact that we're just uncomfortable having the conversation. So I don't think that we can get away from it. I think when we do, we diminish it, and we send a signal that it's not that important. And I think Sophia, touched on it, with a passing comment of all lives matter versus Black Lives Matter. No one's saying that Black lives are more important than other lives. What we're trying to say is these lives matter, period. Because for so long we've dismissed it, and I try to, skim across it and say, well, we've made so much progress. We had a Black president. And I mean, to me, that doesn't end the statement. So, I think we have to keep talking about it. And I don't think we should be afraid of it. Is it uncomfortable? It absolutely is. But if we're going to be honest with ourselves, and Layla started with this word honest, we're going to be honest. We have a lot more ground to cover, a lot more ground to cover.
And
Go ahead, Sophia.
Sorry, Fabian. And if I could to what Todd was saying before I lose my thought. I also think that now is a time for us to stay angry. And what I mean by angry is to stay in a position where you are not desensitized. Because if you are not angry about something, then clearly you're not paying attention.
Right.
And the reason why we have to keep circling back to race, the reason why we have to keep circling back to these injustices is because they're still rearing their ugly head. And part of the way, or one way in which we could stay woke, is to resist the urge to become desensitized. I refuse to be desensitized to see another person of color be treated in an inhumane fashion, recorded on video in front of my eyes. That we should never become desensitized to. And that is a conversation that we must continue to perpetuate, and we must continue to open up until, right? I always say to my students, like, Dr. King, Nelson Mandela, some of the greats must be turning in their grave because all these injustices that they fought, lived, and died for are rearing back their ugly heads. It's like we've circled back to the 40s, 50s, and 60s with this just enormous explosion of racial injustice and uproar, and just all of these social issues that we thought we took care of, and they are still here, which means, and it begs the conversation, that it must remain open. This conversation is still open. Why? Because we still see it. That's on period.
Thank you, Sophia. And I invite all of you that feel angry, channel that anger intelligently, and find others. There are many established organizations, groups, partners that you can join to help express your anger in constructive ways. Make sure that you find good information as a basis for you to manifest your anger. Patrick, I did see your hand.
Oh, I was just going to add one more thing to what everyone was saying. I just want to say that I don't condone violence, but oftentimes violence, if it by the means of taking down statues, burning buildings, that's the only way that legislative officials respond to disparities in our community. And one of the main reasons why these assemblies may be violent and abrupt, because a response to the lack of economic prosperity, affordable housing, education, environmental health and wellness, and change for police reform in our neighborhoods. So in order for us to get a response or a change, it seems as though we have to resort to violence. And we shouldn't have to resort to violence because we are all, I mean, no one is better than anyone. We are all human beings, and we all give contributions to this earth. But like Ms. Sophia was saying, we have to come back to race, and we just cannot say that race isn't a factor or a role being played into marginalize certain groups of people.
Tanya, you're muted. Go ahead. You're muted.
No, I know. So I also think, I was thinking back, like, we're having this virtually, we're in this virtual platform. You know, someone said, how zoomed out are we all, right? But I don't think we should forget COVID-19's connection to this conversation, right? And the connection of the disparate impact of Black and Brown communities. And it's interesting, I'm working on a paper now for a science journal with a bunch of brilliant scientists and doctors about structural racism. And the interesting thing is, this paper that we're working on, I was talking to someone today, a doctor, he was saying how revolutionary this is going to be, that actually a scientific journal is going to name structural racism. And that connects to COVID for me, because in the beginning, when we knew what was happening, especially living in New York City and having it be the epicenter, we knew why Black and Brown people were more impacted. It was because of underlying conditions caused by lack of access to healthcare, by, you know, unstable housing or overcrowded housing, all these different things. And so I think even the way we look at what happens in our country, people look at COVID and see it as one thing, and the virus as one thing. The number, I listened to a Latino civil rights organization talk about the number of Latinx people who are essential workers who can't stay home and do their work. So I feel incredibly fortunate that since the beginning of March, I've been able to be home and continually do work, right? Is it the ideal some days? No, but I have the ability to do that. Whereas other people, because they may not have the education, the language, because, I mean, all these different things. So I think it's also when people make statements, it's not just about race, but in general, about something other than their identity. To me, it's that going inside out question. Like, have you looked at the privilege? I am keenly aware that there are people that I know that have lost people to COVID-19. And yet I can be here in my apartment getting things delivered and not be as impacted. So it'd be easy for me to say, oh, COVID wasn't that bad. I actually have a really hard time with those posts because I literally know people that lost their mother or their grandfather or their grandmother. And I think we have to be careful sometimes to use our identity and our lens as the answer to everything. I think that's one of the challenges we have. That's connected to your ego quote, Fabian, right? Like, it's not just about the way Tanya Odom sees the world. It's actually a much bigger picture and a much bigger world.
Yeah. What is going to help us, and this is hard to do. I know it's hard to do, but we all have to convince each other that we need to care about how others are experiencing their own reality. I have my reality, but my reality could be very different from your reality. And if you are a participant in the society that I live in, then we have this common humanity that we have a shared responsibility. And so I have to care about how the crises, and there are many crises, are impacting you, because it could be very differently impacting me. And that's why so many people now are having dialogues. A lot of my clients, they're having listening sessions because they're being a little bit more open-minded and open-hearted, realizing that being sheltered at home and the conveniences that I might have could be very different from the conveniences that you may not have access to. And if you mean something to me because we're teammates, then I've got to care about that. I cannot be blind to that. That callousness is what tears our society apart. And Patrick, if I may just build a little bit more around this very difficult topic, we won't have all the adequate time to address it, the protests that have turned violent. And my biggest concern is when the violence impacts a lot of innocent people, property of a lot of people that very much could be allies and advocates. And that's what I meant by turning the angry energy in an intelligent way. There is no prescription that we offer tonight because every situation is different. Protests are great. People gathering in masses are great because people can see the numbers. People tend to listen to the numbers, the voices that get amplified. When violence sets in, that's when I invite all of us to be extra cautious about what impact we're trying to make. I want to turn to a question that very specifically asks for practical advice. And here it is. I am a minority. How do I present my desire for change? Many of the things that we've talked about in a way that is respectful, that will allow people to listen to my point of view. How can I do it in an effective way? It's a difficult conversation.
Yeah, I'll take a stab. I think it's a difficult answer. It's not an easy answer. I would say, one, it depends on the relationship you have with the persons you're trying to influence. If you don't have one, then you have to build that because they're not going to hear you. Assuming that you have it, then be your authentic self, present what it is your reality and how you want them to see and understand your worldview. Do it from a place of love. And it was someone else, I think earlier, who said, I think it was Tanya, you have to be in a position to want to change your mind, but you hope that they're in a position to change theirs as well. be unafraid and be comfortable with the conflict, which is what it may feel like. Because if you don't, then you won't have a discussion at all. And that's probably what we don't want.
Let's stay on this topic for a couple more minutes, but I'm going to read another question very related to this. I am a young white female who stands behind Black voices. I am a strong advocate for those who are oppressed. Yet I am still called a racist just because of my skin tone. Do you have any advice on how I can try to change their perspective? So please continue. Offer some advice. Layla, I saw your hand.
Yeah. I would like to say that there's always going to be hate coming towards someone who is standing up for something that's not being shown, or that's not like the norm, I should say. So you should continue. You shouldn't let what they're saying affect you, because at the end of the day, you know who you are and you know what you are standing up for. If they are targeting you just because of the color of your skin, that should show you why you should continue to advocate for this, because that is what we are fighting against. You should continue to do what you're doing, continue to educate, and just block out all the hate. Like I said, focus on the bigger picture, because there's always going to be someone that comes towards you that has something negative to say about you. So just focus on the positive.
Can I add to that?
Please do, Patrick.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I live in a diverse community, but the high school I went to in our area, the majority is white versus Black. But for the most part, I've been around white people my whole life. I don't have an issue with white people. But to the question that you posed earlier, that the white female was being called racist, I mean, she could only imagine how people of color feel on a daily basis. I was in Boy Scouts. And that's mainly all white organization. You could say it like that. They had Black troops and Black leaders, but oftentimes the other people and other troops, they would tease me. I remember one time we were at summer camp. We were in New York, at Camp Henderson, kind of near Cooperstown, and we were at the dinner table, and they were like, "Patrick, how was the fried chicken? How is the watermelon?" And I was like, "It's good." I was like, "It's good." And then they were like, "Ha, ha, ha," keep on laughing. And then for a while, it took me a second to really, I guess, understand what was going on, until I pulled them to the side and I was like, "Hey, I don't like that. I'm just like you." So I just think with people who are not of color, realize that you have power, and we all have power, but it seems as though people that aren't of color, it's like their word sticks, is more pungent, or their word is more credible than people of color. Not saying that others' credibility is diminished or anything like that, but just know if you stand with us, we can get to the next level. I hate to say it, but this is a saying I've heard my whole life: white is right. And it's not to say that white is right, but it seems as though in order for change to occur, you have to have white people on your side.
Oh, so true.
But that's just all I had to say. And then lastly, the other thing I want to say is what I mentioned earlier. A lot of people that aren't people of color, they don't see racism, but I mean, I don't know how you don't see it, but you might not endure it, but racism is there. But one thing I just want to say is, it's more so on opportunity. You can have a poor white man and a poor Black man. Okay, both of them don't have high school diplomas. Okay, for the most part, they might go with the white man because he's white. And he doesn't have a high school diploma, but the Black one doesn't have one either, but they're gonna go with the white man because he's not seen as a threat, or he's not seen as dangerous, or he can't cause us harm. So I just think taking those preconceived notions of people of color out of your mind, get to know someone for the content of their character and their heart versus the exterior, because this is just what you see. But if you really want to know me, talk to me, ask me how I'm doing. If you want to learn more about race, we can have a conversation. It doesn't have to be anything uncomfortable or anything like that. So that's just really all I want to say.
Yeah, here's the invitation to all of us. There's such a variety of people out there, different ages, certainly different races. We got immigrants in our communities. The only way you can truly get to know and understand the unique issues that might belong to a certain group of people is just to get to know the others. And the more you get to know the others, the more you get to realize that they're one of us. Let me make one quick comment, and I'm going to ask another related question, but there's a twist to this. And we kind of touched on it when we were doing our bantering in the first hour. For difficult conversations such as race or anything that is tough, as the person asked, how may I do it respectfully? Yeah, that's one way to do it. But before you enter into the topic of discussion, make sure it is a safe opportunity to do so. Start with your genuine wanting to make the conversation safe in the beginning. Why? Because if someone doesn't feel safe to have that conversation, they're going to have a new goal in mind, and that is to protect themselves. And how do people protect themselves when they feel threatened? They fight or they flight. They go things like, oh yeah, sure, Patrick. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. See you later. I'll do better. No, they ain't going to. So to really be able to focus on it, the one way that you can, well, two ways that you can help with that safety is establishing mutual purpose and mutual respect. Say to the person, hey, Fabian, I heard you making that comment, and this is the first opportunity, now that we're away from the group. I just wanted to ask you, what do you mean by that? Because when I hear that, this is how I take it. This is how it lands on me. Or this is how it can land on people that are important to me. Did you know that there is another meaning to what you said? What was your intention? I don't want to accuse you. I just want to understand. Because I appreciate you. You are my friend. And that's the mutual purpose. That's the mutual respect. Try that methodology. So here's the related question. And it's family related. What is the best way to handle your parents or other family members that do not accept the stuff you believe in or constantly argue with you about the issues going on? I am not going to take that one. I'll leave it for you all. That's a tough one. It's even tougher. That
is very, very tough thing. I see it a lot on social media, kids, when they try and confront their parents, and it turns into this big thing because their parents are just not open to hearing what they have to say. So I would definitely try, you definitely have to focus on your mental health through this process, because it could be very, very hard for you to see that your parents aren't even willing to listen to what you have to say. So definitely focus on that. And if you want to keep on educating and informing your parents on what's going on, try and find positive new strategies to see if they would engage. And if they don't engage, then I don't know, you're just gonna have to focus on yourself and just power through what's going on until you can create your own home life. And just, that's my advice to you.
Thank you, Layla. The only thing I can offer, and I'm trying this now, I don't know that it works at all, is to try to get people to watch a different news channel and have them consume the same information you're having with a different, co-host. I don't know if it works, but I think since 2016, we've seen this, and Tanya and I can tell you horror stories. Who we've voted for and where our position and statement is has been the toughest thing to manage through. Only thing you can do perhaps is just see what people are listening to and see if you hear from their vantage point and hope that they see it from yours. That is not easy. Layla is exactly right. It's a hard one.
It is difficult. Gosh, you gotta love your family.
I just want to also just underscore something that I said, which I'm so glad, Layla, that was actually going to be a point that I mentioned at the end, that through all of this, it is also about self-care and preserving and protecting our mental and physical well-being, right? So I think sometimes people think they have to be outside at a protest or doing something or in an environment or in the middle of something or out all the time. And I think, I'm off this week, and part of why I'm off is because I've been working nonstop, right? And so I know that I'm a better advocate. I know that I'm a better facilitator. I'm a better speaker when I'm taken care of. And there's no way, especially since May 25th, working 12 to 14-hour days, that I could continue that sustainably and do a good job. So I want to also say that sometimes it's not our job. Like, even if it's people that we're close to, I've chosen not to spend as much time around certain people. They're not racist people, they're not homophobic people, but I just don't feel like they're aligned right now. And I have to give a lot of energy to this work, and I'm not gonna take my energy away and give it to trying to convince people that I may know don't wanna listen. So Layla, I'm so happy you did that earlier than at the end, because I think people are potentially burning themselves out. Right? And that's not the goal of being an advocate or an accomplice, right? It's not our job to change everybody. I'd rather put that energy on you all using your power, your influence, your brilliance. I was looking at the website today, and you all are just incredible. Like, the things that the foundation's doing, the things that brought you to this organization, you're absolutely incredible. Your brain power is so powerful. And, I wrote down this quote, the first Black valedictorian of Princeton. His name is Nicholas Johnson. And he had a quote in his remarks, which you can find online, where he said, "Let us build a better normal." And I was thinking, like, how, in his remarks are incredible, by the way, and he's an overachiever like all of you, but it's about how do we build a better normal, which basically means I'm not going to convince everyone to come along on my ride. I know that, right? So I'm going to maybe work with the people who are here, and I'm going to make sure I take care of myself too. So Layla.
Thank you very much, Tanya. It's time to wrap up, so I'm going to turn to each of you for your 30 to 45 seconds of final comments, and I do want to acknowledge the more than 200 questions that have come in, and we've addressed just a few of them. I hope those of you who have called in, thank you so much for submitting your questions. I hope that you've been able to pick up some usable tips in this conversation. And so, in sequence of how you were introduced, panelists, I'm going to turn to Todd for his concluding remarks. Go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, so this won't be that profound. I mean, I just want to thank those who, checked in, stayed in. I'm encouraged by the next generation. I think the fact that we have younger people taking the mantle and allowing us to challenge ourselves, to be more transparent and authentic about who we are, to be allies, is what we need. And I'm optimistic about what the future looks like. Tanya.
Thank you, Todd. Tanya?
Yeah, I would just say what I said earlier: listen, learn, and for me, advocate means action. So somehow find what you can do, because there's an action piece here, or else we'll all be sitting here having this conversation again, right? So there'll be places that your voice is needed. I know that. And so for me, it's listening, learning and unlearning, and then action. And thank you all for.
Great having you on the panel. Sophia.
Yeah, I just definitely wanted to encourage all of those who have tuned in tonight and have really lent their ears and their time. I really believe that this is such an important conversation, and the fact that everyone is here really points to where your heart is at. Stay the course, maintain your position, continue to acknowledge and expose what is wrong in order to make a right. I leave you with the words of Mother Teresa: "I alone cannot change the world, but I will cast my stone across the waters and create many ripples." You are the change that we are looking for.
Thank you, Sophia. Layla.
As Gen Z, we are seen as, I guess, the change or the bridge to difference. So I feel like we definitely need to focus on our mental health through this. That is definitely a main point that people need to gauge on, because although we are seen as the change, we need to make sure that we are okay within ourselves, because we also have issues within ourselves that we need to battle through as well. But, I don't know. Just thank you all for coming and listening to us.
One conversation at a time, right? We can change. Patrick, over to you.
I just want to say thank you for everybody tuning in this evening. And I just want to say that we are more than the color of our skin. We all have various talents and gifts to offer to the world. So let's get to know someone for their heart versus in the exterior. And also, I just want to say, If you have any concerns, just remember, please vote this fall for 2020. All your concerns, vote for the person that you align with and that you feel can better address these racial and social disparities in our communities.
Thank you, Patrick. To all the panelists, it's been a joy to spend this time with you. Karen Kane, we leave you to close.
Yes, thank you. You are all so wise and humble. I learned a lot this evening, and I feel like, you know, we are all still learning together about these topics and how to talk about uncomfortable things. And I wanted to direct everyone to the NSHSS website. We have created several World Betterment Initiative resource pages. And there's one on how to be an advocate where we have collected advice, insight, resources that may help some of you if you have additional questions. We're also collecting stories of our members who are out there affecting positive change. So there's a place on the site where you can share your stories with us. We'd love to hear from you. We also have a Why Vote panel on September 9th. So we're gonna assemble another panel in September to have a conversation a little bit more in depth about the voting topic. And I also wanted to share the scholarships that we have open right now and an educator grant specifically around people who are doing things to affect positive change. Activism and advocacy scholarship. We have a diversity scholarship and a diversity initiatives educator grant. So please go online and apply for those scholarships to help further your education. And I'd like to just end by giving a shout out to the NSHSS Foundation. We foster education through scholarships, specifically targeted to diverse and often underserved students. If you're, here's a sample of a few scholarship recipients. We'd love to see your faces there, so apply for our scholarships and visit the NSHSS Foundation website if you'd like to learn more and donate to our efforts. Thank you very much.
Let's go ahead and end the recording. And to those of you who are still with us, thank you for hanging in there. Give yourself a ribbon, give yourself a heart, give yourself some love.